During dinner with his parents, my phone lit up with a text from Babyboy. He just stared at me. Is it possible to be in love with two people at the same time? I was trapped in that reasoning, and I actually mistook what wasn't real for love and ended up losing the most important person in my life, Edward. My name is Agatha. I'm in my 20s. I'm an influencer and a model. My husband, Edward, and I met while working on one of his hit brand designs. Edward is a fashion designer, and he had partnered with the company I worked for to market his new design, and I was lucky to be chosen as the model to work with him. Falling in love with Edward wasn't so difficult, as he was indeed different from most of the guys I had met. He was really talented and charismatic too. I started by getting mesmerized by his designs and dresses, and I slowly got attracted to the owner too. I got lucky one day, and he actually noticed me. My partner was absent due to health issues, and we were in need of a replacement. Edward immediately volunteered to fill in the spot, saying time was against him and he couldn't wait for the agency to make arrangements for a new model. I found him so cool because not everyone would have made such a decision, but Edward didn't care that he was the boss and never treated anyone as lesser than him. He was kind and sweet to everyone, making working with him so easy and fun too. I was nervous at first, honestly, who wouldn't be? I was actually working side by side with my secret crush, and I think Edward noticed. He helped me relax, and before we knew it, we had slayed the day. People started shipping us and wouldn't stop talking about how good we looked together. I was the happiest person on earth that day, and as if someone had heard my silent wishes, Edward asked me out for dinner right after we wrapped up. It felt like I had just won the lottery, and I wasn't going to let such a chance slip, so I quickly jumped at it, and that night we had dinner together. I wasn't imagining things. I was sure we both felt something for each other, because what started out as a simple dinner ended with both of us in each other's arms. We had one of the best nights together. I woke up the next morning afraid things might end with just that one night, but Edward asked me to be his girlfriend, and he confessed that he actually liked me too. We started dating, and I wasn't wrong about him. He was the best man I had ever had. He treated me so well, made sure I wasn't lacking in any way, and he was so supportive. He made me feel really special, and there was nothing more I could ask for. A lot of people would always say I was so lucky, while others would bash me, saying he deserved better, and now I'm starting to think that maybe they were all right all along. I messed up, and I ended up ruining not just myself, but also the one person who meant the world to me. I tore down everything we had built together for years, and now I don't know how else to fix it all. I ran out of luck the night I got entangled with the one person I should never have met, and I think that's when I got cursed. Maybe if we had met on a different day and time, things would have been different from how they are now. I ask myself this question a million times, but such chances never come by. On the night everything was blurry for me, I had gone out for a colleague's birthday party, and just like every normal night, I had no idea what fate had planned for me. We went all out, and I was too drunk to even get home by myself. I called for a driver since I couldn't reach Edward, and in my drunken state, I gave him Edward's address instead of mine. It was no surprise. It had always been a habit of mine to end up at Edward's apartment whenever I got drunk. I would either get dragged there by Edward on nights he picked me up, or I'd have someone drive me there. It was just something I couldn't avoid, and Edward liked it so much. Edward liked it so much. He said it meant I cared about him deeply, that even in my drunken state, my heart somehow always found its way back to him. That night wasn't an exception either. I arrived at Edward's apartment, drunk and barely aware of my surroundings, and somehow found my way into his room. I heard the shower running and without thinking clearly, wandered inside. I started kissing him the second our eyes met, and within a few minutes, we both had sex. I should have known something was off with the way things went that night, but I was too drunk to even think clearly. Unlike my sex with Edward, the person that had been with me that night was rather too rough, and I experienced more sex styles than usual. Edward would only romance me, and when he felt the moment was right, we'd have sex, and he was done. He didn't have the time to go through all kinds of foreplay or toss me through different angles, and I can't deny that my experience that night was mind-blowing, and I think I lost my head too. I woke up the next morning, and I could swear I saw Edward sleeping beside me. I had leaned closer to steal my morning kiss as usual when I noticed a mole on his neck. I paused for a moment and took a closer look at the guy beside me. He had a tattoo on his left shoulder, and unlike Edward, who had fuller eyebrows and longer lashes, the guy beside me wasn't my boyfriend. Edward had no tattoos, and I had touched his mole and realized the mole was real, and it wasn't just a stain. I could already sense something was wrong. I sat up straight, lightly slapping my cheeks a couple of times to see if I was still dreaming, but the pain I felt confirmed I wasn't dreaming, and it was real. The guy woke up, and the second I heard his voice, I knew he wasn't Edward. I immediately jumped out of bed, wrapping the duvet around my naked body, and demanded who he was. He looked exactly like Edward, and without him confirming it, I could tell he was his look-alike. He introduced himself to me as Edwin, Edward's twin, and before I could even complain about my ignorance regarding Edward having a twin, the memory of what had happened between us the previous night hit me like an ocean wave, and I realized I had just slept with my boyfriend's twin. I dropped to my knees, screaming and asking him what he had done to me, and he too was shocked at my reaction. He tried to calm me down, but I wouldn't stop blaming him, and that was when he told me it was my fault too. He stated I had walked in on him and jumped at him, and he was sorry, but he just couldn't resist the temptation. He apologized, stating he had no idea I was his brother's girlfriend, as he had been away from home for a while and had just returned. He had stopped by Edward's place, and he had no idea I was coming over, and Edward never mentioned anything to him when they talked. He had mistaken me for the person Edward said would be coming over to keep him company, as he wouldn't be back until that morning. Hearing him say that, I realized Edward would be home any time, and I couldn't risk him seeing the both of us like that. I immediately grabbed my clothes, ran off to the bathroom, got dressed, and left Edward's house, running back to mine like I had just murdered someone. I was restless the whole day, and I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if Edward found out, or if his brother had already told him about what had happened. I kept contemplating whether to call Edward and confess everything myself before his twin did, or if I should pretend I was never at his place that night. My phone rang barely 2 hours after I had arrived at my house, and just like I feared, it was Edward. I was so scared to take the call because I had no idea what he was going to say or what I would say to him. I couldn't stop imagining if he was furious and what his reaction would be, and in the end, I couldn't take his calls. The doorbell rang shortly after, and when I went to check, I saw Edward's driver. He had come to pick me up to Edward's, as he wanted to introduce me to his brother, who had just returned. I was going to refuse and lie that I was sick and couldn't join. I couldn't bear to face him or his twin either after what happened, but before I could escape, his driver handed me Edward's phone, and Edward was on the line. Edward first complained, asking why I wasn't taking his calls. I lied that I was in the bathroom and had not gotten the chance to call him back. He immediately asked me to come over because he was going to introduce me to someone important to him. My heart broke 1,000,000 times when he said that, and I could feel the guilt slowly eating me up. I got dressed and joined the driver in his car, and in a few minutes I was walking into Edward's home like I had never been there earlier or the previous night. Edward rushed over to me, pulling me into a warm hug and kissing me right after, before introducing me to his brother. The moment was really awkward, and I couldn't look Edwin in the eye. But Edwin was smooth. He introduced himself to me like we had never met, and even offered me a handshake. I was dumbfounded by his acting, but then I had to play along. I didn't want Edward getting suspicious, and I also wouldn't want him to get hurt because of our mistake. Everything went well, and just like that, Edwin and I were slowly burying what had happened between us. After our meal, I had left Edward with his brother and gone to his room because I couldn't stand being with them both together. I was afraid I might break down in tears from the guilt I was feeling and might just end up telling him everything. But getting into his room happened to be another wrong move, as I couldn't do anything else but reminisce about what had happened that night. The memory kept playing before my eyes like it was actually happening, and my body annoyingly started reacting to it. I couldn't control myself and started craving to experience those moments over again. I had barely gotten my head together when Edwin walked in, and he seemed to notice my restlessness. He asked if I was okay, and I quickly responded that I was fine. I knew he was going to try to bring up the matter between us, so I beat him to it, stating we should both forget about what had happened and treat it as nothing. It was just a mistake, and we should both forget about it and move on, because there was nothing we could do to change anything. Edwin just agreed and said he was cool with it, as it meant nothing to him, and there was nothing special about it for him to dwell on. I could feel my ego shatter at his words. I mean, he had just called the sex we had nothing special and not worth thinking about. The same sex that I couldn't stop thinking about and was literally driving me nuts. I felt offended, and I didn't realize it until I asked him if he really felt nothing after what happened between us. Edwin looked surprised by my question, as he looked at me as if he was trying to tell if I was maybe drunk again. He didn't respond and only gave me an intoxicating smile before moving closer to me, leaning in and then whispering in my ear, asking me what I thought. I could feel every hair on my body stand at the closeness of our bodies, and right after his breath touched my ears. We both stared at each other, and I clearly lost my mind when I kissed him. If the previous night was a mistake due to my drunk state, I really had no excuse for what I did at that moment. I was thinking, and I only realized it after I had kissed him. I thought maybe it was because they both had the same face, and I might be mistaking my feelings for my boyfriend for his twin brother too, but no matter what, I couldn't deny what I was feeling at that moment. I apologized, saying I was sorry, and that I had no idea why I did that. I tried to run away after, but he held me back and then responded, saying I didn't have to apologize. He wouldn't mind if I saw him as my boyfriend, and he was willing to let things between us continue until whenever I wanted us to end things. Us? Writing this now, I can't help but feel disgusted at myself for even entertaining such an idea and even consenting to it. We started seeing each other more often after that night, behind Edward's back. On nights I was sure Edward wasn't going to pick me up, I'd call Edwin over, and we'd both hang out together. People who saw us together would always address him as Edward because of their resemblance, and it was convenient for us both, as we didn't have to explain our being together to anyone. I got comfortable with dating both brothers, and I didn't even realize I was slowly destroying the beautiful relationship I had built with Edward for the past 3 years before Edwin came along. Things got more complicated for us when Edward proposed to me on our 3rd anniversary. He had made all the arrangements with his twin, Edwin, and I was clueless about everything. I had just returned from another date with Edwin, and after being intimate together in his car, he mentioned he wanted us to have dinner before he took me home. On arriving at the restaurant he took me to, I was surprised to see my friends and Edward's friends there, and before I could even grasp what was happening, Edward walked in with a bouquet. After giving me the flowers, he got down on one knee and proposed to me. I felt so ashamed, and I also couldn't believe Edwin too. He knew about his brother's plans to propose to me, but he was neutral the whole day, and he actually had sex with me before bringing me over for his brother to propose. I couldn't reject Edward's proposal, as it was something I had been waiting for since the first day we met and started dating, and at that moment, even though it was finally happening, I couldn't be completely happy. The fact that I was cheating on him, and with his brother too, was something he would never forgive me for. When I said yes, and he put the ring on my finger, I swore I was going to end things with Edwin and turn a new leaf. I was going to be faithful to Edward as we started a new journey together, and I was going to make our marriage work. After that night, I ended things with Edwin, and he too wasn't against my decision. In a month, Edward and I got married, and it seemed like I had finally escaped the storm. Edwin traveled back a week after Edward and I got married, and just like that, I felt like I was starting my life all over again. But most things couldn't be changed or forgotten. Each time I was with Edward, I couldn't help but miss Edwin. His absence even made me miss him more. I would always find myself comparing Edward to him on different occasions, and even when we had sex, I would always prefer the sex Edwin gave me over what my husband offered. My marriage with Edward didn't seem fun to me, and no matter how hard I tried, telling myself I was married and Edwin shouldn't be on my mind anymore, it wouldn't work. I couldn't continue lying to myself, and I just couldn't hold my emotions anymore, so I started figuring out ways to reconnect with Edwin. That was so shameless of me, and that's when I completely lost it. I started by asking my husband about him in disguise, pretending concern about his well-being, and slowly I was able to get his foreign number. I contemplated calling him for days, and finally did one day. Hearing his voice again was able to fill the loneliness I had been feeling since he left, and I kept wishing I could not only hear his voice, but also see and touch him as well. Edwin also expressed how much he missed me, and he was also happy I had decided to keep things going with him. On days Edward wasn't home and I was alone, we'd do video calls together, and we'd sex chat and do a lot of nasty things together while on the call. When Edward came home, I'd transform into the most innocent wife of the century, and my husband never suspected a thing. I got bolder, and on nights I was horny and couldn't sleep, despite the fact that my husband was home with me. I'd take a picture of my naked body and text it to Edwin, asking for his own. After he'd sent me one, I'd finally go to bed after feeding my eyes enough. I was so careful that I'd delete everything afterward to avoid getting caught by Edward, and he too never suspected me, because he trusted me a lot. Things between Edwin and me went on, and after much pleading and persistence, Edwin finally told me he was coming home. I couldn't have been happier, and to be honest, that was the best news I had gotten since I got married to Edward. I just couldn't wait to have Edwin in front of me, beside me, and inside me. I was so engrossed with Edwin that I forgot all about my husband, and each time he complained that I was different, I'd tell him I was just stressed from work and that everything was okay. Edward tried to make an effort to make things between us like before, but no matter how many dates he took me on, how much effort he put into making me happy, or how many times we had sex, Edwin was stuck in my bones, and I couldn't just get him out. Soon, the long wait was over, and Edwin was arriving that day. I was over the moon with joy and hadn't even imagined that that day would also turn out to be my end. I had no idea it was going to be the day I'd dread the most. I returned from work earlier than usual to get myself ready to meet Edwin once he arrived, but Edward called me, telling me we were going to have dinner at his parents' place. I was so pissed at him, and I was sure he too was shocked by my tone and response. He asked what the problem was, and I just waved it off, saying I was tired and had gone home early to rest, and now I still needed to drag myself to his parents' place. Edward felt guilty and immediately apologized, saying he was sorry he hadn't been thoughtful and had not considered that. He added that I should get some rest and that he would explain things to his parents. I was happy that it was sorted out until I got a text from Edwin saying he wouldn't be able to see me immediately after he got back because his parents had called him over. He promised to meet me later, but I just couldn't wait. I missed him so much and couldn't wait to see him. I immediately called my husband Edward, saying that I'd be joining the dinner with the excuse that I didn't want his parents to worry. It was just an excuse to see his twin, but Edward, clueless, agreed after confirming 1,000,000 times that I was really okay and strong enough to attend. Edward was still so worried that he sent his driver over to pick me up. He was worried about my safety if I drove alone, and he had no idea about my intentions. If he did, he would never have done that, nor would he have given me that much love and attention the way he was doing. I soon arrived at his family's house, and after a while the table was set, and we were all seated, ready to have dinner. My husband's parents were talking and trying to start a conversation with me, but I would always find it hard to keep up, as my mind and eyes were wandering elsewhere. I couldn't even focus on the meal or my husband, and my eyes were looking all over the place, restless, as I couldn't find Edwin anywhere. I had barely stopped myself from asking the whole family where he was, and why he hadn't arrived for dinner yet. Looking back, I really have no idea what possessed me, and what was so special about Edwin that I was so stupid and risked everything. I had gotten up to use the restroom, and shortly after I returned to the table, my father-in-law suggested we take a selfie together, and that's when things came crashing down for me. My husband was going to use his phone, but he realized he had left it in his car. He immediately asked his driver to get it, and in the meantime, he asked to use mine. It was just for a selfie, and refusing to do so would have been so weird, and I wouldn't have known how to explain why I refused. Without protesting, I gave my phone to Edward. We all came together with big smiles, and just when we were about to take the picture, my phone lit up with a text message from a contact I had saved as Babyboy. My jaw dropped, and before I could snatch the phone away to hide it, Edward opened the text message and then stared at me. I could feel my body trembling, and no matter how hard I struggled to keep a straight face, Edward's stare was enough to tell me that I was in for trouble. His parents' eyes kept darting between us, as they too were confused and speechless about what was going on. I became restless as I had no idea what the content of the message was, and I ran out of excuses. Who was I going to tell them I saved as Babyboy? And how was I going to explain a text message I had no idea what it said? Before I could calculate my next move, my husband got to his feet and calmly gave an order. "Follow me." Without protesting, I got to my feet and followed him. We got to his car, and the next words he said were just enough to drag me into a coma. He ordered his driver to take us to a hotel, and the address he gave was that of the same hotel Edwin and I often visited. I could feel sweat trail down my back into my panties as I started to panic. I knew what was coming, but there was really no escape for me. I stuttered and tried to explain to my husband that it was just a meaningless message and really meant nothing, but Edward wouldn't buy that. He scolded me, asking who would save a meaningless contact with such a name, and even add a heart emoji to it. The more I tried to talk him out of it, the angrier Edward got. In no time, we arrived at the hotel's parking lot. Edward got out of the car, and without wasting a second, dragged me with him into the hotel. As if my day hadn't been bad enough, the receptionist at the counter was the same one who usually welcomed Edwin and me each time we visited. The second she saw me, she greeted me and Edward, offering to take us to our usual room. I almost swallowed my tongue as I saw the devilish smile curl on Edward's lips. His eyes had darkened, and his grip on my arm grew even tighter. I was in so much pain, yet I couldn't complain. I had no idea what he might do to me if I dared make a sound. All I could do was keep up with his pace as he dragged me toward the room the receptionist mentioned. I couldn't break free even if I wanted to, and I knew it was over for me. I started praying it wasn't what I was thinking, and that Edwin wasn't in the room, but my prayers went unheard. The second I saw the room door unlocked, I knew I was dead. Edward was so impatient he didn't even bother to knock. He swung the door open and stormed inside, only to come face to face with my shame and betrayal, lying naked on the bed with a rose in his mouth, waiting to surprise me. I felt my heart stop as my husband's eyes met with his twin brother. Edwin was just as shocked. He immediately rushed out of bed to put on some clothes while trying to explain the situation that had already blown up to his brother. Edward's eyes were red, and the betrayal was evident. I had just realized the weight of the mess I had seen as nothing, and was shamelessly enjoying it. Edwin's excuses woke me up from the obsession I had thought was love when he told his brother that everything that happened was my fault. He claimed I had seduced him and had forced myself on him. That fool didn't stop there. He cut me deeper by saying I had always claimed I enjoyed his sex better, and that he really didn't want anything more from me, and had only used me to satisfy his pleasure. He claimed he had been bored ever since he came back and saw me as perfect entertainment for him. He claimed he wasn't going to apologize to Edward for anything, because he had warned him countless times before not to marry me, saying I wasn't worth it, but Edward had refused and gone ahead anyway, and he had no one to blame but himself for not listening. I could feel my blood boil as I watched and listened to Edwin talk. My eyes were hurting as the tears gushed out, and I thought they were blood, not tears. I couldn't stay quiet anymore and screamed at Edwin, asking him over and over again why he could say such things. The next thing that followed was a heavy blow from Edward, landing straight on Edwin's face. Edward grabbed him by his shirt, asking if he felt satisfied having watched him make a fool of himself. He asked if Edwin had finally had all the fun he wanted, and told him he didn't need to worry. He was going to let him have more fun. Edward didn't need to explain what he meant because I could already tell. I immediately grabbed him by his leg as he turned to leave and started begging. I apologized, telling him it wasn't my fault and that Edwin was the one who had seduced me. I confessed that I had been drunk the first time it happened, and without being able to control myself, I started confessing everything to him. I'm certain Edward's ears almost bled from all my excuses and pleas, and he grabbed me and pulled me to my feet, almost hitting me. I don't know how he held back, and he just tossed me onto the bed with all his might, thundering that he never wanted to see or hear my voice ever again. He threatened that the day I showed my filthy self to him again, he was going to make sure I regret it. He said he no longer had anything to do with me, and that I should never, in this life or the next, call his name with my mouth again. He took off our wedding ring and tossed it at Edwin, who kicked it away like it was trash. Edward walked out of the hotel room, leaving me and Edwin alone. After crying nonstop for a while, I gathered my voice and asked Edwin why he had done what he did. Edwin claimed he was just as upset that his brother had to find out about them now, and he had been planning to have more fun with me before exposing me and traveling back to continue his life. He said he could understand that the first time it happened, I was drunk and had mistaken him for his brother, but the second time I stirred things up, he had decided he was going to ruin me. He claimed his only regret was that his brother had to find out about everything himself, and he knew it was going to be hard. But he and his brother were definitely going to work things out. The assurance and confidence in his voice made my skin crawl. He had completely ruined me, and he was claiming that his brother would be fine and things would turn out well for him. I almost lost my mind with anger, but he didn't spare me a second glance, no matter the tantrums I threw or the amount of tears and curses I rained that night, and he just left the hotel room. I sat there crying and regretting all my actions, but there was really nothing I could do to change what had happened. Update. I had taken Edward's threat lightly, and now I'm in a bigger mess. There really is no end to this. After our last encounter that night, I stayed away from him because I felt we both needed space to cool off. My plan was to go back and ask him to take me back once things settled. I knew Edward, and I thought that no matter how angry he was, once he calmed down, he'd be easy to reason with. 3 weeks after our fight, I went back home. The house was a mess, and it looked like Edward hadn't been home in a while. Worried, I texted him that I was home and wanted us to talk and fix things. It wasn't even an hour after sending the message that I heard his car pull up at the entrance. I had just finished cleaning the house and cooking a meal so we could eat together, but the grand reconciliation I had imagined turned into a moment where I feared for my life. Edward stormed into the house in a rage, and his anger only grew when he saw the table I had set. The smile on my face vanished as fear engulfed me, and before I could take cover, the meal I had prepared was sent flying. I got hurt while trying to flee. Edward growled that I had a lot of nerve showing up at his house and acting like everything was fine. He said he'd given me a clear warning, but I had disregarded his words and tested his patience. He immediately pulled out his phone and called a number I didn't recognize, telling them he no longer cared what they wanted to do since he had no intention of paying a dime to save anyone's face. I couldn't understand what he meant until my phone started blowing up minutes later with calls and messages asking what I had done. When I clicked on one of the links, what I saw almost killed me. My nudes had just been posted by an unknown account, and people online were dragging and bashing me mercilessly. Edward revealed that he had been blackmailed with those pictures, and they had demanded a large sum of money from him. He said he had been willing to handle everything quietly because he didn't want it to affect his company, since I was their top model and brand ambassador, but after seeing my attitude now, he realized it was pointless. According to him, I wasn't even remorseful. He told me to get ready because he was going to sue me for damages. My heart dropped. I knew what was coming. Edward threw me out of the house without mercy, and a few days later I received divorce papers. He wasn't only divorcing me, he was suing me for damages to his company and demanding heavy compensation. I tried to hire a lawyer to defend myself, but Edward added more charges, claiming that my affair with his brother had traumatized him and destroyed his mental health. He demanded more compensation. The charges kept piling up until I was buried in debt, owing Edward, his company, and several other brands affected by the scandal. I pleaded with Edward to show mercy, but the more I begged, the worse things became. He was out for my life, and I was on the verge of losing it. I tried reaching out to Edwin for help, but I found out he was also on the run, terrified of what Edward might do to him. He had left the country with no plans of ever returning, leaving me with no one to save me. I lost all my sources of income, and I can't even walk outside with my head held high because of the scandal. My debts led to the seizure of all my properties and even my parents', and I sold whatever I had left: clothes, shoes, accessories, and bags, just to gather enough money to escape. Now, I'm hiding in a remote town, trying to get away from Edward. But no matter how far I run, the fear of being found still torments me. I can't help but pour everything out here because I don't know what else to do. Signing those divorce papers wasn't enough to satisfy Edward's thirst for revenge. No matter how much he's made me suffer, it's never enough. What was I expecting after everything I did? I have no one to blame but myself and Edwin. Now I live the rest of my days scared that one morning I'll wake up and find someone who recognizes me. Or worse, Edward standing in front of me. As much as I want his forgiveness, I can't forgive myself for hurting him. I know there's nothing I can do to make things right, but if there's even the slightest chance, I still want things to go back to how they were before. I just want the man I once loved and my life back.